Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the lesson on factoring. We're actually going to have several lessons on factoring this week. Factoring is an important skill that we'll all need to refresh before we move on to looking at limits algebraically. So, excuse me, the first thing we're going to look at is factoring by greatest common factor, or GCF. So when we look at an algebraic expression, all the terms share a common factor. Could be a variable or a coefficient or both. So look at the first example, 6x squared plus 8x minus 14. There is not an x in all those terms, but there is a common factor of 2. So when you factor out the 2, and remember factoring is a division, so when we factor the 2 out of each of those terms, what you factor out goes out in front of the parentheses, and you divide everything else by 2. So our factored expression is 2 parentheses 3x squared plus 4x minus 7. Now look at the second example. Second example is x squared plus 7x. In that example, the x is the greatest common factor, so when you factor that out, you're left with x parentheses x plus 7. Now you'll see on your sheet there are 4 more practice problems. So why don't you pause the video now and work on those practice problems, and then come back in a few minutes and I'll discuss the answers with you. So pause the video now, please. Well, if you pause the video like I asked you to, welcome back. So let's take a look at these practice problems. 8x squared plus 10. The greatest common factor is 2, and when you divide that out, you're left with 4x plus 5 inside the parentheses. On example 2, if you look at this, 6 and 8 are both even numbers. So 2 definitely will go into both of them. And each of those terms has an h in it, so you can factor out a 2h out of that. And it leaves you with 3x plus 4 inside the parentheses. Now if you take a look at this next expression, x cubed minus 5x squared, the greatest common factor here would be x squared. So you factor out the x squared and you're left with x minus 5 inside the parentheses. You have to remember when you're factoring out, just like we did in number 2, a variable with exponents, you can only factor out the lowest exponential value. So in this case we can only factor out an x squared, not the x cubed. And on the last one, the greatest common factor here is simply x, because each of the 3 terms in this trinomial have an x in them. So when you factor out the x, it leaves you with x squared plus 8x minus x squared. That should be a plus 8x minus 11. So let's take a look at some trinomial factoring. So when we factor a trinomial with a coefficient of 1 in front of the squared term, we're looking to find 2 numbers that multiply to the third term and add to the second. So you could list out all the factors of 6, and they're both negative. They're both positive, by the way, because the 6 and the middle term are both positive. So factors of 6 would be 3 times 2 and 6 times 1. Well, 3 times 2 only adds to 5, and 6 and 1 adds to 7. So the factored expression is x plus 6 times x plus 1. So on this page I have 3 practice problems. So why don't you pause the video now, and after you've done those, come back and we'll go over the answers to them. So again, if you pause the video, welcome back. So in this one, c squared plus 7c plus 12, we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 12, add to 7. So factors of 12, both positive numbers by the way, would be 12 times 1, 6 times 2, 4 times 3. The only set of those that adds to 7 would be 4 times 3. So the factors of this would be c plus 4 times c plus 3. Number 2, the plus 10 tells you that both factors are the same sign inside the parentheses. The minus 11 here tells you that they're both negative. So 10 does not have a lot of factors, two negative numbers, negative 1 times negative 10, negative 2 times negative 5. Only one set of those numbers adds up to negative 11, and it's y minus 10 and y minus 1. They multiply to give you positive 10, and they add to give you negative 11. The last example, the last practice problem, x squared minus x minus 2. This minus 2 tells you that the signs in the parentheses have to be different. And the minus x tells you that the larger of the two factors will be the negative number. So those factors are x minus 2 and x plus 1. Hopefully this was a review. When we do this in class, we're going to do practice on some problems you may have seen, some problems that may be new to you, but we all need to get the factoring down because it will definitely be a very big help when we look at finding limits algebraically. So thank you for tuning in to the first of the factoring review lessons. I'll see everybody in class. Thank you very much for tuning in.